أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. We're streaming live from the IOU Global Headquarters in the Gambia. A very warm welcome to all of you, wherever you might be joining us. We appreciate the fact that you have taken time off your busy schedules to be part of this series of psychology webinars to be organized by the International Open University. The main objective of these webinars is to create awareness on the importance of psychology and why we should all study it. This is reflected in the themes selected for these seminars, and they are as follows. Theme 1 is looking at the history and relevance of psychology in our everyday lives. And of course, Theme 2 looks at perspectives of Islamic psychology. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's event is the first of two parts. Do join us for part 2 as well, this coming Saturday, the 27th March, inshallah. And there will also be a brief Q&A session at the end, so you can type your questions in the chat box. I am your host for this event, and I am Sister Aminata Jaite, the IOU country representative in the Gambia. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin with the welcome remarks by Dr. Charna Omar Bari, President and Vice Chancellor of the International Open University, IOU. Dr. Charna, you're welcome.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. On behalf of the Chancellor of the University, International Open University, Dr. Bilal Phillips, I am very pleased to welcome all of you to the web seminars that we have dedicated to Islamic psychology. Today, the first of the series is going to be dedicated on psychology and how it is relevant to our daily lives. And we have our keynote speaker, who is going to be Sister Fatima Jain, the head of Department of Psychology at the University of the Gambia. And we will have two discussants, one of whom is Mr. Bakari Sonko, who is the program manager of the Mental Health and Substance Abuse and Management of the Ministry of Health and Social Welfare, or the Ministry of Health of the Republic of the Gambia. The second discussant, Mr. Sergio Camara, is the Psychosocial Officer, who is also going to speak on how the psychosocial effects of psychology. The seminar, the webinar, as we normally call it in this case, it's an initiative of the Chancellor, Dr. Bilal Phillips. The intention is to ensure that people understand how psychology in general is very relevant to our lives. In the context of the Gambia, for example, we have gone through a very traumatic stage in 22 years of a different republic, under which people have discovered that many families lost their dear ones, others died, others disappeared, and the trauma of that has been noticed, particularly after the revelations of the Truth, Reparation and Reconciliation Commission. Another trauma that we have all been going through is the COVID-19. It has created loss of jobs, it has created a loss of lives, and many people are suffering as a result. But unfortunately, many people do not understand how psychology is relevant in all this. How people can be mentally disturbed, how people can be mentally deranged, how as a result people can turn to be violent, ununderstandable, and with very little or minimal patience. So psychology in general is very, very important, but the webinar series, today being the first part, is going to allow us not only to discover how psychology is important in our lives, but it also share with us the perspectives of Islamic psychology in general. So this is it. So therefore, without much ado, I would like to invite the keynote speaker to take the floor and invite the moderator, Sister Aminata Jaite, who is the country representative of the International Open University in the Gambia, to moderate the event. I will also want to mention that the vote of thanks will be delivered by Dr. Francisca, the head of Department of Psychology of the International Open University. So I wish you all a wonderful session, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chorno, for that welcome remarks. And next up, we have our keynote speaker, Aja Sister Fatima Jan, the head of Department Psychology at the University of the Gambia. Sister Fatima Jan is a BSc and MSc in Psychology, PGCE in Psychology, lecturer and head of Department of Psychology at the University of the Gambia. Sister Fatima has taught psychology for more than 25 years in the Gambia. And her topic of discussion as the keynote speaker is History and Relevance of Psychology in Our Daily Lives. Sister Fatima, you are most welcome.
For this Gambian webinar, I will be talking about the history and relevance of studying psychology. Now, the history of psychology will be very briefly touched because psychology is defined today as the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. However, philosophical interest in human mind and behavior dates back to ancient civilizations of Egypt, Persia, Greece, etc. Now, Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi was one of the most well-known and respected physicians during the 9th century. His contributions to medicine, psychiatry, influenced several medical fields, including pharmacology, pediatrics, neurology, and psychosomatic. Now, when we say psychosomatic, it means or psychiatry. Most of the time, people's mind would come straight to today's psychiatrists, like Freud, Sigmund Freud, or Carl Jung. But actually, this Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi was the first one who came up with curing and looking at psychosomatic illnesses. So today, psychology has its modern roots in thinking of French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes argued the theory of innate knowledge and that all humans are born with the knowledge through a higher power God. Now, this was not taken very well. It was this theory of innate knowledge that later led atheist philosopher John Locke, to come up with the theory of empiricism, which held that all knowledge is acquired through experience. Now, Descartes' notion then of rationalism, pursuit of truth through reason, was replaced by empiricism, pursuit of truth through observation and experience. This later gave rise to the school of behaviorism, founded by John Watson. And this is why the behaviorists are responsible for most of what happened in society today in terms of advertisement. They are the ones, behaviorist psychology, in terms of advertisement. All of these things are, because it deals with stimulus and response. They stimulate the individual and then the individual responds to their stimulus. So the formal development then of modern psychology is usually credited to the work of German physician and physiologist and philosopher Wilhelm Wundt. Now, Wundt helped to establish the first lab in the field of experimental psychology and served as a strong promoter of the idea that psychology could be experimental field. In 1875, he began to make plans for the creation of a program of experimental psychology. And Wundt was the first person who actually called himself a psychologist. So he and his colleagues gave rise to structuralism. Structuralism is the idea that the human mind, our minds, were made up of different components, which could be broken apart and studied. Now, the cognitive revolution arose from the belief that behaviorism missed some of the complexities of human cognition and behavior. Because cognitive psychology interprets human behavior in terms of how we process information. How do we process information? How we learn, how we understand certain things. Now, in today's famous psychologists include, obviously, Sigmund Freud, who is psychodynamic theory, B.F. Skinner, behaviorist, Abraham Maslow is famous for his hierarchy of needs, which is mostly talked about in different fields, actually, in businesses and in psychology and everything. Now, Piaget, a developmental psychologist, is also one of the famous psychologists in development study, which looks at childhood development. Yeah? So, that was just a brief touch on the history of psychology, which is very wide, but because this discussion is mostly, I want to focus mostly on the relevance of psychology. So that was just a brief discussion there on the history. So the discussion then on the relevance of psychology will focus not on what I might want to say. I would like to say a lot of other things, but I'm going to focus on the need of the audience, what the audience need to know about psychology and why psychology is relevant in our everyday life. So many people are not familiar with psychology, but that is changing. And hopefully, with this webinar's aim of raising awareness about the relevance of psychology and its relevance in everyday life, people will be able to connect the dots of how important this is. They'll be able to connect the dots. So the International Open University Psychology Program can actually provide graduates with 3 major abilities. And one of them would be the ability to understand their own and others' behavior based on psychological science. Humans often approach the world through the lens of myths, false beliefs, and stereotypes. Now, ill-informed lay approaches to understanding how and why individual groups and society behave in a certain way may lead to misunderstanding. It can also lead to conflict. It can also lead to lack of efficiency. So obviously, correcting those myths and those false beliefs and also stereotypes can actually help. And this is where psychology can come in, because psychology can explain all these things. Like, they'll explain better how that, instead of myths, you have realities of research, and even linking research to what the individual might know already. So number 2, the ability to carry out research and predict their own and others' future behavior better than chance. You'll be able to also predict your behavior better than just leaving things to chance. Yeah. So psychological science have studied human and societal behavior for over a century and have formed and tested theories that help understand why human behaves the way they do and how they often do at individual, group, or societal level. So number 3, the ability to use psychological science to address social problems and improve people's lives. So graduates then from the International Open University will gain an awareness of how psychological knowledge can improve the well-being of individuals, build capacity of organizations and nation, strengthen to capacity policy, service, provision, and even legislation. Now, a certificate or diploma can eventually lead to a degree in psychology, which can apply to a wide range of specific relevance across domains such as mental health, physical, school, higher education, organizations, business management, leadership, criminal justice, policing, military, law, community development, social welfare, activism, conflict resolution, policy, and legislation. So then there is a wide range of areas in which psychology can be of benefit in the public. So psychological knowledge then is constantly evolving. And because it's evolving, psychology graduates will also have the capacity for independent lifelong learning, because it's lifelong. I mean, we are all learning. I mean, as we're alive, everybody learns. But having the knowledge and the know-how to carry out research, to look at issues that are happening in this changing world, can be, psychology can give you that background to be able to do that. And these skills to stay up to date with latest, most groundbreaking theory, research, application in psychological science. So the strength then of the psychology program at the IOU also will rest also on few principles. Strong knowledge base in the first and second year through a range of required courses that are relevant within the context. Yeah? Early exposure to how psychology applies to a huge range of job sectors and career choices. And then students will also be able to identify how they plan to use their psychology degree after graduation, required professional and or research internships. Psychology is often misunderstood because a lot of people assume that psychology degree mainly trains people to become clinical psychologists, counselors, or therapists. While this is only a fraction of the profession that psychology graduates are prepared for. Yeah, because as soon as you say psychology in a group, you can read my mind, or it's not that. There are a lot of other things, yeah. And so psychology at IOU can focus on prevention more than cure. How do we prevent something? Now, a lot of people are now talking about positive psychology. What is positive psychology? Looking at what is positive about the individual and then enhancing that positivity to stay on top of things, rather than waiting until there is a problem before you solve the problem. Because the root cause of depression, anxiety, addiction, relationship issues, anger, late cognitive development in children, and illnesses need to be addressed and incorporated in the curriculum. Now, this is necessary because it will help the lecturers, it will also help the students to know about these issues. How can we prevent these issues? If we know what are the causes of these issues, what is causing us depression? Can we link it to social media? Can we link it to our hectic day-to-day lives? And what causes anxiety? Why are we addicted to our phones? These are all issues that one can look at. And why are relationships failing? So relationship issues. So when you look at that, you don't wait until the relationship fails before you start solving the problem. If you know ahead of time what the causes of these relationship issues are, then these relationship problems can be solved. Or even anger management. Like, for example, we talk about late development in children, late cognitive development in children. Most parents would actually think that they're doing something good for their children by giving them a lot of sweets, a lot of sugar. I mean, obviously they think, oh, if I give this to my child, they'll be happy, they'll enjoy their food. But actually it has, you have to give the child this the right types of foods, like, say, for instance, in Gambia, give them the fruits in season. They are sweet enough. And the child's cognitive development can be rectified in terms of late development. But most people are involved in looking at why children are not learning and not knowing why is it that they cannot even learn in the first place. I think all these issues need to be addressed, okay? And this can be incorporated in the curriculum. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran have told us in many different verses about prevention. Example, just one example I would use here is don't go near something. Which actually there is a theory in psychology, like foot in the door effect. I would say it's the same thing as don't go near something. Don't go near gambling. Don't go near alcohol. Don't go near zina. He's not saying don't do this. They don't go near it. Because why? Because as human beings, we are very consistent. We are consistent, and the consistency can sometimes even lead us to something positive or something negative. It depends on where we put our foot or where we go near something. So when you go near gambling, it's not because you are a bad person, that's why you continue to gamble. It's because you are a consistent human being by nature. So going into gambling, going near it, would make you continue want to do it, not because, and then the whole society will be saying, this person is really bad. Well, how come they are not listening? How come are they not learning? That gambling is, it's not that simple. That is why even for us, everything that we do, we have to be very careful how to do it and when to do it. And once people understand that in our nature as human beings, we are consistent. So therefore, that consistency is the reason why we should stay away from things that we don't want to get involved in. Because we see a lot of people who are so-called drug addicts. And then what do we say? Oh, this person is a drug addict. Without, and that person, we are not better than that person. We are not more intelligent than that person. It's just because that person went near it and we didn't go near it. So how do we stop this? So prevention. So I always say that, well, Allah is the one who created us, so he knows us better than we know ourselves. So psychology coming up with this theory of consistency in human beings, then Allah who created us know it. I think that is why it is said, don't go near this. Yeah. So indeed, most graduates of psychology, most graduates from a psychology degree can become entrepreneurs, policymakers, activists, managers, business owners, health and social workers, educators, consultants, and etc. So the power of a psychology degree then is that it teaches a student to be a better thinker and how to apply the understanding of oneself, because psychology actually starts with yourself. You understand, once you understand yourself, then it's easier for you to understand other people. The focus is not on people. But obviously, yeah, you have to understand yourself. Once you understand yourself, then you can link it to others, yeah? And this can be more effectively, one can effectively create one's own future and change one's own society towards a more optimal growth and improvement. So everyone's work involves dealing with other humans. There is nobody, we are social beings, yeah? Everybody deals with everyone. So achieving the ability then to understand people, predict, persuade humans means that they will have the capacity to operate more effectively at most on things they choose to do. So the world is struggling with coronavirus, losing loved ones, anxious for loved ones, our well-being, the economic struggles. These are all very stressful. Now, in the Gambia, we're simultaneously going through the TRRC. TRRC is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Now, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is set up to expose some of the horrors that happened during the past regime. Now, this is not done to pass judgment on people. This is done so that people can come in terms of this is what happened. So actually we can do this because the people who might do some horrible things are part of the society. So then it's like a reconciliation. Once people know that this happened, then at the end of the day, people can come back and talk and then reconcile. It took place in South Africa too. After the apartheid system, they had their Truth and Reconciliation Commission to look at things so that the apartheid system, the blacks and whites can get on and move well in South Africa. So this is, and these horrors are definitely difficult, and the public are listening to these accounts through the radio, through the television, and they are glued to it. So it can add an extra burden of stress on the society. And again, this is another area that understanding psychology or studying psychology can be a factor in helping people to deal with this situation. Therefore, the relevance and importance of studying psychology for health workers cannot be underestimated, considering the role they play in physical and psychosocial support to help their patients and clients understand and make healthy lifestyle choices and be able to also manage their stress. Psychology is also relevant for social workers to understand and analyze their clients' attitudes, feelings, behavior. They can also help them to promote stability within the family, protect children, security, physical, their diet, and their mental well-being. So the role of the International Open University in the relevance of psychology in all sectors of our institution cannot be underestimated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Fatima, as our keynote speaker there. We really appreciate your contribution. To discuss these issues, we have the first discussant with us, who is no other than Mr. Bakari Sonko, Program Manager, Mental Health Unit, Ministry of Health, the Gambia. Mr. Sonko holds a master's degree in advanced mental health and clinical nursing. He is the coordinator of the community mental health team responsible for nationwide outreach services. Mr. Sonko also is the focal person of the mental health and substance abuse for WHO and Ministry of Health in the Gambia. Mr. Sonko's topic is on substance abuse and management. Mr. Sonko, you're most welcome to present. Thank you.
Welcome, viewers. I'm Mr. Bakar Sonko. My presentation is on psychosocial support in the management of people with substance abuse disorders or problems or misuse. So history have proven that people who have problematic drug use and alcohol face various challenges pertaining to their health, their physical well-being, their emotional status, and for them to focus, it's a big challenge for them. So there's evidence-based through literature that psychosocial support, the use of psychological interventions, support patients or clients, to deal with their problems. And we have to understand that psychosocial treatments are now considered essential components in terms of any comprehensive substance abuse management. And recent research have supported that too, and there's evidence based on that. However, through rapid strikes, and there's evidence that development of these strategies become very, very effective because they've been exposed to it and then people started to respond. So today our topic is going to be centered on that psychosocial support as far as substance abuse management is concerned. All right. Now, therapeutic approaches that we have, psychological interventions for treatment of alcohol and drug problems cover a broad area of treatment interventions, and which can be theoretically based. And we need to put it on clinical practice, and some have done it, and it has evidence. So the aim of it is to elicit changes in the patient's drug use behavior and any emotional issues or factors that might change the person's cognitive functioning in terms of addressing the issue. So as a result, consensus is there that several psychosocial treatments, or interventions exist, like cognitive behavioral therapy, contingency management. We have motivational enhancement or motivational interventions or interviewing strategies. Then we have what we call brief intervention strategies also, and relapse prevention. Now, the main criteria of effectiveness is that a psychological therapy leads to either a reduction in or an abstinence from the substance of use, or change in behavior of the individual, because the intervention, that's the main target. And it also prevents the individual from taking risk-taking behaviors like sexually transmitted disease like HIV or even hepatitis infection. So there's a change in terms of the person's behavior, not limited only to the substance of use, but other risk factors that might be associated with the substance use behavior also. Psychological interventions can also be used in a variety of treatment settings, either as a standalone treatment or in a combination with pharmacological substances like use of drugs and medications. So at times we have to understand that we can do this emotional therapy, psychological therapy for the person, but there are certain situations whereby combination of use of medications like psychopharmacological medicines will be very, very important. And at times, that combination supports a lot for the management of patients also. So one of the interventions is brief intervention. Now, these brief interventions, the effectiveness of this has been established primarily for alcohol use, but there's evidence also other drug users also benefit from brief intervention. So the aim of the intervention is to help the patient to understand that their substance use is putting them at risk and to encourage them to reduce or give up their substance use. That's the most important thing, so that they understand what the effect of substance use is upon them, and then how best, they can be supported in trying to address those issues. In general, a targeted program or risky substance users and then are not intended to treat people with chronic or, we'll say, serious addictions of substance users. But if those people are faced, or you challenge with them, what's important, you send them for specialized care and the like, or refer them to more advanced practices. Then there is another psychological intervention called motivational enhancement or motivational interviewing that clients can also benefit from. So this helps people to explore and resolve their ambivalence about their substance use and begin to make positive behavioral and psychological changes in their life, because they will be psychoeducated for them to understand that there are issues that is making them to use these substances, which is going to be addressed, so that they know that those substance use are not the solution to the problems. So the principles of motivational interviewing is, it includes expressing empathy through reflective listening, developing discrepancy between patients' goals and values and their current behaviors, and avoiding arguments and direct confrontation. This is very important. And then we need to also help the patient to adjust to his or her resistance and supporting efficacy and the self-optimism, because this person is prepared to take action. So it is important for us not to confront the person or argue with the individual. Instead, we motivate them to be able to take the responsibilities and then promote whatever they are doing and encourage them to do more. So effectiveness of this motivational interviewing is evidence-based too. Research findings have shown that people who are substance users, most specifically alcoholic users, they benefit from this intervention also. Now, there is another important psychological intervention called cognitive behavioral therapy, what we call CBT in some constants. Now, the cognitive behavioral interventions, also called CBT, comprises an array of approaches based on the learning principles. And then it theorized that behavior is influenced by cognitive processes. So what you think, what the person is thinking might influence his behavior. If you have a negative thought towards you that you are against him, he might fight you. So the negative thought going on, then reaction is going to be fighting. So in that concept, if the person believes that the substance of use is what is going to make him perform better, then he's going to use the substance. So cognitively, the reasoning is there, because if I take this substance, I'm going to feel better. As a result, the person is going to do that. So we use this intervention in order to challenge those negative thoughts in the individual for people to understand. So there's emphasis on the identifying and the modifying irrational thoughts and managing negative mood and intervening after a lapse of a period of time, because this is important for the individual to understand. And people also have to know that if the person's mindset is become positive, that without the substance I can function, that can lead to resolutions for the person to give up the substances. So that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is also using. So the cognitive strategy can also use by recognizing and challenging dysfunctional thoughts and about substances, and recognizing seemingly irrelevant decisions that might lead to the substance use. So the irrational thought or dysfunctional thought will be, this substance of use is making me to pass exams. This substance of use is making me to speak to people. Now, that without that substance, then the person is likely not to perform as expected. So as a result, that negative thinking of the use of the substance needs to be redirected to the individual to understand that is making you not even to function as expected. So that's important in cognitive behavioral therapy for people to understand. And also in cognitive behavioral therapy, there are lots of behavioral strategies that employ coping with craving, because the substance user is not the desire to say I have the money to do it, but the desire that I want to have more. Because you don't have it, then you have some physical and psychological emotional issues like irritations and the like. So in order to cope with those challenges, those physical and emotional problems, then you go for the substance. So that is called craving that the individual faces. So those are motivating factors. And at times it will be relaxing for the individual when they take the substance. But we have to understand that that relaxation is temporary. And the more they don't take it, the more problems they are likely to have. So other elements of CBT can include social skill trainings, effective communication skills, refusal skills, and problem-solving skills that patients can be taught, so that these individuals will be able to have certain skills that they can depend on, and they become productive members of the society. Then they will put a value attached to that. So that will challenge their negative thoughts that they will have. So that's the significance of cognitive behavioral therapy, as we discussed further. There is another one called relapse prevention. It's similar to cognitive in terms of the skill provided, but not the basis of it. What's important here is what is the individual doing to help him to be more engaged so that they don't go into risk-taking behaviors or things that are tempting for them to take substances. So if they have some functioning job or they have certain skills that they can work on and they realize what we call the individual self-esteem get busted. So that's helpful for the person. The person will see him or herself as a very responsible person, and that will prompt the individual to try to prevent use of substances. Although its narrative of that can be seen in cognitive behavioral therapy, whereby individual is supported to learn skills also. But here is the main objective is to prevent relapse from the substance use also. So it is originally designed for people who use alcohol, but now it has been used in other drugs, and there's evidence based that relapse prevention measures also support patients also. The other aspect about psychosocial support is contingency management. In contingency management, we look at what we call a voucher base or a price base, or there's something, a value attached to something that you can give to the client. And this client will be looking at that, like what you call the carrot and the stick concept. If the client knows that if I do good, this is what I'm going to have. Oh, I'm going to have $10. Oh, I'm going to have a fare. Oh, I'm going to have a break. That expectation is going to motivate the individual to behave otherwise. But there's another way around also. In the event that you use the substances, then those breaks, those prices that are going to be given are also going to be deprived. So the negative feeling that I will lose will make him to continue taking the substance. So there's a contingency which is there. So there's something that the person is also expecting. I will have a ride, I'll go home, or I will have a token economy, or they'll give me a balloon or a t-shirt, or they'll throw a party for me. Those expectations make the individual to be self-motivated in order not to take the substance. So that's why I say contingency management. All right. Now, we also, to conclude, therefore, one should know that evidence is there in terms of psychosocial interventions in substance use disorders. They are available, and these are research-based. So this is important for us to understand that we cannot compare one intervention strategy more than the another intervention strategy, or to put significance on one better than the other one. What's important here, they are all good. So you can benefit more if you can combine two. And then we can also understand the benefit also is not limited to interventions only, but with the use of other medications. So we can have pharmacological interventions with psychological support to support patients. Any patient, one or two will work, or both will work for them. That's important for us to understand in this narrative. Now, we also have to understand that these treatment approaches is leading to change in behavior, because that's what we are after. There are some medications that are not available for certain substances. If somebody is using cannabis, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychological interventions might be very, very effective than the use of substances, because we don't have any pharmacological medication that is going to be used for preventing the person to use cannabis. So in the event that is not there, we opt for the psychological interventions. So this is one of the most significant areas that we have to understand. Psychology plays a leading role in behavioral modification. As a result, people change so that they become very positive in life. They know that I don't even have to hook to medications, because there's another way around also. If the medication is given, the medication also might have its own secondary effects. But talk therapy, when you talk to the person, you give psychological intervention, there's likelihood you might not have those negative consequences. That shows the significance of psychology in the interventions as far as substance use disorders are concerned. Now, we recommend, therefore, that an institution like IOU, International Open University, which should be encouraged to do some research based on psychological interventions among selected groups. That is people who have multiple substance users, or adolescents, or people who are using specific substance, or from a given community, if the community is an influencing factor in their substance use. So research areas need to be looked into. So it will be very important if an institution like this can embark on some of these researches. We can come with recommendations to look at some of it. And they can also research also on these interventions too, what we call operational research. In terms of these psychological interventions that we're talking about, how effective are they within the various groups that we see? So in a nutshell, we will say it is important that an institution like this have taken the bold decision to come with psychological interventions in doing a program called Psychology as one of their programs in the institution is commendable. And I will say thanks for your time and your keen listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakari Sonko, for that interesting discussion around the topic of substance use. We now move on to our second discussant, who is no other than Mr. Sergio Camara, Psychosocial Support Officer at the Ministry of Health in the Gambia. Mr. Camara is a mental and psychosocial support officer at the Ministry of Health in the Gambia. He's also a trainer and a global addiction professional counselor. Mr. Camara is a focal person for drugs and substances, sexual and gender-based violence, and a national trainer and case manager. Mr. Camara's topic is psychosocial support during crisis. Mr. Camara, you're most welcome.
My presentation today will be on psychosocial support in crisis in relation to the relevance of psychology in our daily lives. By the end of this presentation, I hope that my audience or viewers will get to understand the basics of psychosocial support and be able to provide psychosocial support to people in crisis situations where it may be necessary. The basic concepts of psychosocial support is in any situation of disaster or times of crisis, people may lose their loved ones, properties, or in the context of health emergencies. And the emotional responses or the psychological responses of people differs depending on the individual and the circumstance where it happened. The more intense the crisis is, the more severe the crisis is, the more the negative effects of the crisis on the people that are in that situation. So basically, survivors who are in those crime scenes or in crisis situations, together with people who help them, respondents, those we call psychosocial support officers, do have some form of stressors or stress. And that is why people, when they are sent in the scenes of crisis, are given briefing. Briefing means to give them information prior to getting to the scene so that they are prepared psychologically. And when they return from the scene of crisis also, you debrief them so that you listen to their frustration and understand what sort of difficulties happened on the scene of crisis. It is important that we all know, as a psychosocial support officer, to understand when we are tired, when we are burnt out, so that we know where to stop. And we ask for help from our colleagues to excuse ourselves for other people to come in to support. Many times we think we want to change the situations of everyone, but then sometimes we need to be realistic and understand that we cannot move forward to give chance to other people to come and support us as well. Psychosocial support refers to generally the actions that you will help someone with their psychological needs to help them to understand what is happening in relation to their mindset, their behaviors, and their emotional feelings, as well as the social context they're surrounding, to be in connection with their family, loved ones, and in the community as well. Basically, that's what the psychosocial support does for people. And when we are faced with crises or disasters, we respond to them in three broader aspects. That is in the context of thoughts, feelings, and behavior. When you talk about the thoughts, in the context of thoughts, we do have this recurrence of the events in our mind, reconstructing the event back in our minds to as if we live in the moment right now. Difficulty to pay attention to what is being said in a situation if you find yourself, or poor attention span. Repeated thoughts of the memories will come back to you time and time, even if you're helped. So that is why people will require this sort of support when they are faced with crisis or disasters at any time. In the context of feeling, people may be withdrawn from other people, social isolation, not wanting to maintain the connection with their family or community. At some point, they have the sense of loss, deep sense of loss, emptiness, or not worthy of living. Depression could come on if you do not help them sincerely. Some people can run into depression, or sometimes post-traumatic stress disorder can come in as well. In behavior, people can be overprotective of themselves, their loved ones, or their families, be startling, getting agitated so easily, getting annoyed or angry over irrelevant issues, or experiencing difficulty to fall asleep when they have to. Sometimes they might tend to be crying for no apparent reason, even though there is nothing to cry for. Tears will fall out and you are not in control of those because of the emotional trouble or the difficulty you have in relating to your feelings and behavior. As a psychosocial support officer, we must be aware of this emergence of thoughts, feelings, and behavior in the context of crisis, because this will help us to understand that the reactions to them is natural and it's a natural response for people, but people would react to situations differently. And we need to have this understanding of psychology so that we can help people by understanding their mindset and their reactions towards the stimulus of what happened in the crisis situation. Spirituality in our context, especially in the Gambia, we do understand most people do have beliefs in religious aspects. So when you help people psychosocially, you want to tap from the already developed coping mechanisms that are easy for them and not to invent new things, because new things bring in fear and anxiety. We want to make sure they develop on what they have already so that it's easy and we do not have to bring in anything that is difficult for the individual. Many times when we get into crisis or disaster, we're affected in different manners and people respond to it in different ways. But again, there are a series of steps that some people will undergo through to get into accepting the situation that is happening today. This is the 5 steps of acceptance or 5 steps of grief processes. It begins from denial, especially when the health emergency context. When COVID-19 started initially in the Gambia, people do not accept the fact that COVID exists. We want to think that it exists in other parts of the world, but not in the Gambia. That is a state of denial because you do know exactly it is happening, but you don't want to buy the idea. And you get annoyed over it, be angry over why that thing is happening. And after that, you tend to bargain, to push and pull, to wanting to understand whether this is real or whether your mindset is true over what is happening or whether it is not. Some people, after they get to bargain, to understanding, they get to a stage of depression. Depression means you think you're not worthy. What is happening is draining you down and you are losing connection with your family or your loved ones and not wanting to associate your social lives again. All of this, after you have undergone through these steps, you get into the step of acceptance. That is to know or to accept the fact that this problem exists and it's not going to change unless I change my mindset to accepting it and do more for myself or allow the help that I'm getting to help me to be meaningful or to be functional back in my life. The time taking for different individuals in this context differs, depending on it could be the age of the individual, the genetic makeups, or the surrounding, or the nature of the disaster that happened. Many people will cope with the situation or move ahead with their life once they get to accept the situation already. The steps are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Many people, of course, we do know we can't all be affected by disasters or crises, but then there is a group of people who are more affected than the other. Example, in the context of elderly people, we all do know their immunity is diminished, their physical well-being is diminished due to the aging processes. So they are not able to help themselves adequately as opposed to the young age group. Children who are developing, adolescents, women who are pregnant, we know their immunity is divided sort of between the child and the mother. So it's difficult for them to help themselves as well. Poor people and single parent family, they're difficult. If you're not able to take care of yourself, you cannot take care of the family that is dependent on you. So if you find yourself in any disaster situation, the effect is more intense on you as opposed to someone who does not have all of those characteristics. People living with disability or other health conditions, bereaved, people who lost their loved ones or lost the properties of what is important to them in their livelihoods. Rescue workers and field workers, as in the respondents, psychosocial support officers themselves, could be affected. Because if you want to change the situation of people and you are tired, it's difficult to help yourself out. So that is why if you're helping people psychosocially also, you need to be sincere, to be there for yourself so that you know when to stop and ask for the help of your colleagues. But when you help people psychosocially, we do this in the form of a pyramid, with the understanding that even in the construction of a building, the more solid the foundation of a building is, the more you expect that the building entirely will be stronger. So that's why when we help people with psychosocial support, we want to start from the basics of what they require. Those are the essential needs: food, security, shelter, water. If they are not available, we get them that. If that is not solving the problem, some people, a minute number of people may graduate to community, where you want to help people to connect back with their community, because some disasters, of course, will displace other people, to lose connection with their loved ones, their families. You want to help them to find these people, to connect back, or to be reintegrated into society. Some group of people can require some form of counseling, basic counseling or psychotherapy, which of course will need someone to provide who is being trained or supervised to provide those services, but wouldn't essentially require you to be a specialized care provider in those regards. Just a minute number of people, few people out of all the people who are affected in a disaster will require specialized care. That will be professional psychological counseling or mental health care. But this will be just minimal number of people who are affected the same time as the people that you're helping with the baseline. But for every profession, every work that we do, people need to possess qualities to help people so that you at least you have something to guide you to do what you're doing. In the context of psychosocial support, we want to have active listening skill to be in connection with people that we listen to so that we understand their position or understand their frustration. We want to have good communication skills to be in control of the tone of our voice, to speak clearly so that what we speak is being heard. Trustworthiness so that people can trust or can open up to us. But approachability, we want to put on the smiling face so that we don't frown at people and they can have the zeal to want to open up to us to talk to you. To be patient, one of the key qualities that we must have is to allow time for people to vent out their frustrations, because we know when we're helping people in this situation, they're in difficulty and they are not able to behave like other so-called normal people that we regard. Kindness, and to be committed to love the job that we do, to want to change the situation of people, to add value into their life, to not have a fixed mindset about people, to not be judgmental. You don't want to say he or she failed to do so and so, that's why this happened to the person. You just want to have an open mindset until you have the foundation of what happened. You don't want to make the judgment. But to understand psychological aspects of a human being, to understand that psychology is a study of the mindset in relation to what are transferred into their behavior, feeling, or emotions. Having this basic understanding of psychology will help you to understand the kind of things that are transferred in someone's mindset as a result of what is being manifested into actions. Also, activities for psychosocial support will include psychological first aid. Psychological first aid basically has to do with the 3 L's. The 3 L stands for look. When you get into the scene of crisis, you want to look for safety, the security of yourself, including the person that you're coming to help. You also want to find time or a quiet or suitable environment which is conducive for you to be able to listen to someone actively, to understand their perspective and their frustrations. And the other L will be linking, to link them to services that you're not able to provide at the time. Organizations who can provide some services that you don't have at your disposal to give them at the moment. Sometimes you want to form a group discussion for people so that they share their opinion and help one another out. Visiting their household to understand or to assess the environment, to see for any security need that you can improve or not, to creating social network, people to be in connection to one another, to maintain the relationship, healthy relationship in this context. You can also establish peer support group, people of the same age group, like let's say 18 within 18 years of people, to getting them together so that they share their opinion, their ideas as to what happened, because people of the same age kind of think alike. So if you have them to explain the scenario of what they experience, it helps the other people to come up also. School-based activities for children that are going to school, to make sure they have those relationships, to be connected, to build the confidence and trust, to learn from other people also. Sometimes you want to train vocational skills to make sure they are engaged in something and to not be wasted also. Helping people to be calm during crisis will require you to provide the care in a very conducive, quiet, and calm environment so that you can hear and they can hear you also. You be in control of the tone of your voice, to speak not too softly but not too loudly also, so that there is commensuration in what you're doing together with the activity. Listen attentively and to show care. To not say sorry, we do not have to say sorry to people, but then we can be empathetic to put ourselves in their position so that we understand the sort of difficulty they're facing and what sort of help we can extend to them. Maintain eye contact, but this has to be in context of cultural awareness and the norms and value, because some cultures wouldn't allow you to maintain eye contact for a prolonged period. So when we do this, we want to be aware of those cultural norms and values and to be abiding by them also. To reassure people, we do not have to promise people that we are going to provide so-and-so services, because we cannot tell what will come in the future. But then we can reassure people of their safety that we can provide at the time so that they're comfortable and the anxiety or the overwhelming feeling wouldn't be there. If some people in times of crisis do feel unreal, some people think they are not existing within an environment, or sometimes a part of their body might be missing or some form of a disability may come. So you want to make sure they're connected with themselves. Some people you want to ask them to tap on their thighs or to tap on their hand to make sure those parts of the body are existing. In an environment where you have structures, you can point out structures to them to say, this is a TV, this is your auntie, this is your brother, so that they know they live in an environment together with those people, and those people are loved ones, they matter to them, so that the connection will be there also. You can also advise them to tap their feet on the ground, to understand that they live within an environment and they're not there alone. Their surroundings, you want to make sure they're aware of that. The breathing, you want to ask them to take deep breaths slowly and exhale more quickly than they take in the breath. This is soothing because it helps the brain to be perfused of more oxygen, and then your thinking become more clear. Then you can function, or you can decide for yourself. Because if we're traumatized, many times it's difficult for us to think clearly. So having to take this time to getting yourself relaxed will allow you to think more clearly, and you can take decisions that matter more in your life. Basically, having to understand the psychology of oneself, or having to understand the relevance of psychology in our daily lives, as far as a human being is concerned, being it a responder, psychosocial support officer, being it a beneficiary from the service of which they're giving it to you, will help us to think broadly and to understand or to relate with people more easily, more fruitfully, to help them to become meaningful and to be functional in their daily life. But basically, that's what I have for psychosocial support in the context of psychology in relation to our daily functions or daily activities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sergio Camara, for that very interesting discussion around psychosocial support during crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, next we have a brief Q&A session for about 10 minutes before the vote of thanks. With us to do this is the head of department of the psychology department at the IOU, who is no other than Dr. Francisca Boca Aldacre. Dr. Francisca has studied cognitive psychology in Italy at the BSc level and later specialized in neuroscience in Germany with a PhD. She is now a professor for Islamic studies at 2 universities in Milan, Italy. She also teaches Islamic culture at the Italian Institute for Islamic Studies, the only institute for continuous Islamic education in Italy. Dr. Francisca, you're welcome to the Q&A.
Thank you.
So we'll go straight into the questions. Alaikum salam rahmatullahi barakatuh. The questions that we have lined up here, thank you so much. The first question, Dr. Francisca, is the associate psychology better than the BSc psychology of IOU? Are psychology graduates going to find job quickly and well paid? This is a question from Suwan.
So thank you for this question. As for the difference between the two programs, actually the associate program is thought of as a shorter version of the bachelor. It takes full time, 2 years of your study work, while the bachelor takes full time, 4 years. Of course, also part-time study is always possible. As the associate program is thought of as a possibility of doing a dual program in psychology. For example, if you're already doing a bachelor in Islamic studies, but you would like to have a minor in psychology, that's when the associate program would start being useful for you. Also, it is possible if you start doing the associate program and you find it interesting and you would like to further your knowledge on psychology, you can always proceed directly to the bachelor program. As for work opportunities, these are extremely varied. Of course, for some type of works, like being a psychometric assistant or a psychologist or a counselor, it is possible to do so directly after the degree, depending on the regulation of your country. So this changes massively between state and state.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Francisca. The next question is from Fairuz Salma Afifa. And the question reads, after finishing bachelor's degree program of psychology in the IOU, I think he means to say, can that give us a recommended, or can you give us a recommended university to continue the master program of psychology? There's a word here, I guess it is the master. Yes, so he's trying to find out that after finishing your bachelor's degree program at IOU, can you recommend a university to continue the master's program of psychology?
Yes, of course you can continue at any university at master level, but at the IOU we are currently working under the direction of Sheikh Bilal and with my colleagues at the Department of Psychology to create a master in Islamic psychology and counseling. So if you're interested in practicing psychology or being a counselor, then moving to psychotherapy, and you would like to do so from an Islamic perspective, please do keep updated with our newsletter, subscribe to our channels, and you will know when the program is ready, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francisca. We move to the next question from Mariam Huda. Mariam is asking, is there a master's in clinical psychology program at IO?
The master that we're planning to open will cover, of course, topics on clinical psychology because it will include counseling, but it will not be only about clinical psychology, because what we see as Muslims is that there is a whole understanding of psychology which must be created from an Islamic perspective. So the student must know the theoretical basis, the theological basis, and then, of course, how does Islam look at different schools of psychology, and then to practice counseling or psychotherapy. So it will be a more generic Islamic psychology and counseling master, not a very specific one.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Francisca. The next question is from Salman Hassan. Salman is asking, is IOU offering courses in counseling?
Yes, currently both at the associate level and at the bachelor level, there are courses on counseling. Our own professor of Islamic counseling is Sheikh Hussein Rasool, who is the author of the textbook on Islamic counseling available in the English language. So we have his expertise firsthand. And then, of course, on practical side, we will be more active with the master, which will also include training, inshallah.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question is from Amina Musa, which says, if a degree holder wants to become a clinical psychologist, what is the first step? Is it better to gain experience before furthering? I need more explanation on this, please.
All right. So if you want to become a clinical psychologist, usually a bachelor is too little. So our advice is that you proceed with a master. Then afterwards, depending on the country that you work in, you can either become a psychotherapist straight away. So you start gaining experience, especially getting a mentor or somebody who can teach you on the field. That would be recommendable. Or depending on the regulation of your country, you will need to do a psychotherapy school. That varies massively. What I advise is that before gaining experience, though, you have done the minimum requirement of the bachelor and the master on a theoretical level, because practice alone in psychology does not really work very well to qualify you.
Thank you once again, Doctor. This next question is from Buyo Bolicha. Excuse me if I'm not pronouncing your name properly, but the question is, how can our difficult in conversation and quick forgetfulness after studying be dealt with? What suggestion will you give to an individual with such a problem, especially when studying?
Yes, of course. One has always to understand whether his difficulties in understanding and in concentration are in the normal range or are in the problematic, let's say, range. So is it a pathology? And if it is a pathology, of which sort? Is it biological or is it psychological? But if it is in the normal range, we also have knowledge from Islamic sources. For example, the Imam Shafi'i said that one person should abstain from sins if he wants his concentration to improve. So of course, one should always take care of his moral and faith before starting studying. That is necessary and crucial. And afterwards, if still he's not seeing results and he sees things not being in the normal range, then look for a Muslim counselor who can help you evaluate your situation.
Thank you, Doctor. And this might be, excuse me, the final question that we have here says, if I do certificate in Islamic psychology from IOU after bachelor's degree in a secular psychology from outside, can I become a counselor or should I do any additional course for that?
So it depends on the regulations on your country. In general, you can become a counselor with a bachelor in psychology. What we recommend is that you also follow a master, and inshallah we will soon also be able to offer shorter courses just for counselor, not for psychologists, because these are different qualifications. So basically counselor is a bit less restrictive than psychotherapist, just in general idea. So what I suggest, however, is that you check the regulations in your country and then you try to get some sort of theoretical understanding from IOU in Islamic psychology.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We thank all of you who have sent in their questions and even those that have not sent in their questions. Inshallah, we are going to move into the next segment, which is the final segment, the vote of thanks, to be delivered by our very own Dr. Francisca Boca Aldagri. Dr. Francisca, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, dear speakers, dear moderator, and all the brothers and sisters following us online, taking part, asking questions. It's my privilege to have been asked to make the vote of thanks today. So on behalf of the International Open University, of Dr. Bilal Phillips, his chancellor and founder, as well as the organizer of the event and the entire team, let me extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers. So the first thank you is for Dr. Chernomar Berry for his efforts towards focusing the importance of psychology in our daily life, and also mentioning and explaining to us the situation in the Gambia. I must also mention our deep sense of appreciation for Professor Fatima Jean, the head of Department of Psychology at the University of Gambia, as her explanation of the importance of psychology today, starting from a history of the discipline, has really clarified us this field. Also, her ability to understand our own and others' behavior and put that into relationship really explained to us why is psychology important. And also, thank you, Professor Jean, for the kind words about our psychology program at the IOU. Further, we are also grateful to Brother Bakary Sonko, the program manager for mental health of the Ministry of the Republic of Gambia, who has talked to us about the very important problem of substance abuse, and he showed us how cognitive behavioral therapy can help the members of society who are weaker and suffer from this problem. I also wish to express my gratitude to Sergio Camara, Psychosocial Officer, and our own IOU graduate. Thanks for highlighting the specific needs of Islamic psychology in Africa, and especially the creation of an Islamic psychological practice. And finally, thank you to Sister Aminata Jaite for moderating this event. I hope that this event will start a long and fruitful cooperation between the IOU and several educational and governmental institutions of the Gambia. It is indeed necessary to develop a form of psychology which will serve the needs of the population. And that is what we have been doing with our programs in psychology, and what we are planning to do with even more education on Islamic psychology and counseling. So, dear speakers, brothers and sisters, once again, I want to state that we are very grateful to all the speakers on this virtual platform. We hope to see you in part 2 of our psychology webinar, which will be on March 27th at 12 p.m. UTC. I leave now the last word to Sheikh Bilal Phillips. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to invite all of you to attend a conference webinar on the 23rd and 27th of this month. This conference is on psychology. It will be shown on YouTube. Psychology is the focus because of the great need that the Ummah, the Muslim Ummah, has for qualified people in this field. However, we don't have them. So please join me in this webinar. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.